A little while after we open the second PETA location, I'm looking out the front window and I see this guy who looks like he's about 150 years old who just missed his bus and is getting soaked in the rain. And I'm sort of overcome with pity for him, and I'm thinking about bringing him a free lunchtime combo, which is a pita, a pop, and a cookie, just to ease his misery a little bit. And while I'm standing there with a lump in my throat, debating if he's a chicken, beef, or veggie man, he all of a sudden turns around and looks at me like Hannibal fucking Lecter reading my thoughts. And he takes a beat and then starts to walk right at me, comes right in the restaurant, dripping all over the fucking tiles, and says, "I saw you're hiring," which caught me totally off guard. I thought the guy was going to ask for a blanket and a place to sleep. I said, "Weren't you just trying to catch that fucking bus?" And he says, "Yeah, I was actually going for a job interview, but that bus driver's a total prick. I saw your sign in the window, so this works out perfect." And then he says, "Hey, my name's Terry Lessard, by the way." So I say, "Okay, Terry, let me see if I get this right. You're gonna change your entire career because you missed a fucking bus?" And he says, "Yup," and hands me this soaking wet envelope and says, "Here's my resume. I don't have any PETA experience, but you know, how complicated can it be, right?" And he grins like we're both in on some secret together. And I was about to hand him back this soaking wet resume and say, "Pretty fucking complicated, but you'll never find out, you cheeky motherfucker." But before I can get the words out, he starts going on about how hard his life is and how it's all fallen apart for him. And my feelings of pity start to return, which is obviously a real weakness with me. So I give him a few minutes to make his case, and he says he used to play hockey for the Toronto Maple Leafs in the late 70s. And I say, "Good God, Daryl Sittler, Boyer Somming, Mike fucking Palmatier?" And he says, "Yeah, I played with them all, some great fucking years for the franchise too." Says he played most of the 77 season but missed too many practices and got cut before the playoffs because he's a recovering sex addict. And I say if they cut all the sex addicts in the NHL, there'd only be drunks and rookies left on the fucking ice. And he says it's no joke, even though I thought that actually was a pretty good joke. He says the addiction took precedent over everything else in his life, even hockey. And he says no one from those days will even talk to him now because some of the women he got with were married to his teammates. And none of this is his fault, he says, because addiction in any form is actually an unresolved trauma the subconscious covertly tries to make sense of, but often gets stuck in obsessive reenactments and destructive behaviors. He lost me on that part of the story, if we're being honest, but I was totally game to hear more about the Leafs 77 season. So I said, "Terry, can you excuse me for a second? I just have to check something in the kitchen." And I go to the kitchen and look this fucking guy up on my phone, and it is, in fact, the Leafs 1977 defenseman Terry Lessard. And okay, no, the guy did not have much of a career, but still, he did play a few shifts with the Leafs back then. So I go back out and tell him that I'll hire him on a probationary basis, and as a way of lightening the mood a bit, I said that if I found him with his dick in a pita, his pita career would be shorter than his hockey career. I followed up with an LOL, but he didn't laugh at that joke either, saying erectile dysfunction is the most common side effect among recovering sex addicts, so he couldn't fuck a pita even if he wanted to. On the first Saturday he's working here, I get a cardboard cutout of Terry in his Leafs uniform printed up and paid him an extra $200 to sit at a table and sign some autographs as a way of promoting the restaurant. But about 5 fucking minutes into this event, this middle-aged dude walks up and says that Terry is his father. Terry just looks the guy up and down and says, "Yeah, probably." Then Terry says, "Sorry about not being the world's greatest dad, you know. I really want to be there for you and your mom," even though Terry never once asked who this fucking guy's mother was. Then he gets all emotional and says that any son of his that has the guts to walk through that front door like this guy did gets a Coke, a pita, a cookie, and a fucking hug on the house, and that's all there is to it. And I guess Terry was thinking that he was just talking to that one guy, but of course this fucker leaves, and an hour later half the fucking country is lined up around the block, all saying they're Terry's kids too and want to claim their birthright to a free lunchtime pita combo. And when I call him on it, all Terry's got to say is, "Yeah, sorry, I fucked a lot of women back then, Pete." I said, "Jesus Christ, Terry, you ever heard of condoms?" And he starts to get a little somber and says that when he was a kid, him and his brother tried to increase the girth of their penises. I guess they felt the length was pretty good. But he got over enthusiastic and did some damage to himself, which turned out to be the traumatic event that's been causing Terry all his problems ever since. He says me asking about condoms really triggers him because it was that injury that made condoms totally unworkable for him. I tell him that I have no clue what that even means, and all he says is, "What I gained in girth, I lost in sensitivity." And once again, I'm starting to pity this poor fuck. So I tell him that I think he's proven himself to be plenty sensitive enough for me, and that he can keep the job if he wants it, but that I wasn't going to pay him the $200 for the promotional appearance since I had to close early because all his fucking kids wanting free pitas, cokes, and cookies. Terry said that's fucking fine and he'd be happy to fucking continue working here, and then he said thanks.